Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. This is Greg Alexander, CEO of SBI, a sales and marketing consulting company dedicated to helping you make your number. This is the weekly SBI podcast series, and today we have a great guest, Amy Slater. Let me introduce Amy to you. Amy is the Senior Vice President of Worldwide Sales Operations at Rovi Corporation, a provider of solutions for the discovery and personalization of digital entertainment. It provides things like interactive program guides, interactive listings of programs, etc. Customers include Facebook, Dish Network, Charter Communications, and several others. They employ about 1,200 people, and they do a little over $500 million in annual sales. Amy is responsible for driving transformation and continuous improvement in the effectiveness of the sales force in pursuit of revenue growth. She has over 25 years of business experience with stops at some of the world's great companies, such as Cisco Systems and Salesforce.com, and she received her degree from UCal Berkeley. Amy, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much, Greg.
All right, so today's topic is an interesting topic. It is the annual strategic planning process as seen from the desk of sales ops. So, Amy, Rovi's fiscal year, I believe, begins January 1st. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So as a publicly traded company, I assume there is some form of an annual strategic planning process. Is that true?
Yes, yes, it is, and you actually caught me right in the middle of it. We do what we call a long-range planning process, and we are in the throes of it as we speak.
Perfect. I'm glad to hear that because that is what I want to talk about. So I love the terminology there, the long-range planning process. So what's the definition of long range?
Yeah, so we look not only at the year to come, but another 2 years out. So we really look at a 3-year horizon for our long-range planning.
Wow, that's fantastic. Some of my clients can't get past the next 90 days, and you're looking 3 years in advance.
Yeah. Well, I have to say we spend a lot of our time in the 90-day cycle as well, but in order to really plan properly from a product roadmap and making sure we have what we call interlock between our sales and our business groups, we really need to look at that entire horizon of 3 years, not just at the short term.
That was a great lead, and I was going to ask you about that. So the strategic planning process, sometimes in companies, it's driven by the product roadmap. It sounds like maybe that's the case at your company?
Yes, it is, but it's really dependent upon that mutual collaboration between the product teams and the sales and sales leadership teams as well.
Okay, very good. And this long-range planning process within the calendar year, when does it kick off?
This year kicked off about mid-June, and it will carry through till about the end of August. Okay,
very good.
And it really precedes the budgeting, both from a sales planning as well as the P&L budget. So all of that gets done. All of this long-range planning gets done first, and then we launch into setting quotas and then the budget and expense for the coming year as well.
Okay. I'm going to get to those nitty-gritty details, budgets, quotas, things like that in a moment. Before we jump into that, just for the purpose of the audience, typically the way that this works, and I'm speaking in generic terms here, and then we'll apply this specifically to Amy's situation in a moment. The CEO and the board take a fresh look at the corporate strategy in early to mid Q3 is what we normally see it. Obviously, your company is doing that a little bit earlier, which is great. During this period, assumptions are made. Things such as, what are we learning from market research? Who are the competitors? Strengths and weaknesses of our offerings versus their offerings? Any change in customer behavior? They take a look at assumptions around the go-to-market model in terms of which channels to use, which ones don't, and all that kind of stuff. And then what comes out of that at the board level is a revenue and profit target for the next year. And from there, all the operational plans get built. So it's very much a kind of board-driven, shareholder-driven, top-down approach usually. Amy, it sounds like maybe you guys do things a little bit differently than that. Is that true, or is what I just said fairly representative of your plan?
I would say it's fairly representative.
Okay.
There certainly are the targets, but we also take that bottoms up approach. So I'd say something fairly unique about Rovi is our product teams are pretty intimately involved in the customer engagement and the customer experience. So they're certain that when they're designing product roadmaps that they know by customer what the needs and expectations are. So while we're doing all of this, there's also the aspect that you mentioned around market research, competition, customer behavior. We did a huge effort around that about in the last 90 days and released about a 150-page report on the market dynamics. So that preceded the long-range planning process. So very similar that we did a lot of that market research in advance so that we really have some guideposts as we move forward.
Okay, great. It's fantastic to hear that you started outward in. You started with the market, the customer needs, and worked backwards. That's one of the things that we advocate for. And unfortunately, sometimes companies claim to be customer-centric, but then when it comes time to do the effort, like produce a 100-page report on what's happening in the marketplace, they shy away from it at times. So congratulations on that effort. And then normally from there, we get into the late Q3, Q4, and here the functional leaders, sales, marketing, product, et cetera, start building their strategy. And then we cascade down from there and we get into the nitty-gritty detail around, designing territories, hiring profiles, headcount plans, comp plans, quotas, organizational structure, and stuff like that. And the reason why I'm just laying this out in our first segment here, because I just want to make sure that the audience, which largely consists of sales and marketing leaders, can contrast what you're doing there at your company and kind of this generic, here's how it normally happens for an organization that's January to December, and then we can dive into the details. So does that, when you start functional planning, so from your perspective in sales ops, when you start doing these sales strategy related items, does that happen in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, they started, a lot of it starts at the end of Q3, and then we move into some of that finalization around Q4.
Okay. And
I'd say that's accurate.
And in your business, is it a transaction revenue stream? Is it recurring revenue?
There's both. I'd say a big portion of our revenue is around customer renewals, but then we have and I would say the transactions, I wouldn't call it transactional business per se. They're certainly long-range, larger deals, so fewer deals in a quarter, but about 20% is generated by net new business.
Okay. So, and the reason why I asked that is that sometimes companies that have predictability in future revenue streams, which it sounds like you do, are able to do long-range planning because there's some stability there, whereas organizations that have to manufacture the revenue every 30, 60, 90 days, sometimes they can't do long-range planning. So is there some stable, ongoing revenue in your business model?
Yes, certainly if you would say that anything in business is stable. I'd say in comparison, we're not resetting the clock at zero every year. Like when I was at Cisco, it was a very different model. You set the clock back to zero, at least on the product side, maybe not on services, but on the product side, it was a new year every year.
Yeah. Okay.
So you had to do the whole thing over again. So absolutely, we do have a foundation that we can work from.
Yeah. Okay. And that great contrast with the Cisco example. That's what I was trying to get to. All right. Very good. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back from the break, we're going to speak to Amy about how she translates corporate goals, such as revenue and EBITDA targets, to sales objectives. If you're interested in improving your annual process and following some of the things that Amy does, I would encourage the audience to get a copy of the SBI magazine, which is I'm holding up here. The reason why that is that we spell out in the magazine several other use cases like Amy's on how to do the planning process correctly from the sales ops office. It can be very helpful. So if you're not familiar with SBI magazine, don't know how to get it, here's some information on it.
Making your number is hard. Your problems are complex. Complex problems need complex solutions. Introducing the SBI Magazine. Read in-depth stories written by award-winning journalists about how your peers have overcome their problems to make the numbers. When you need more than a tweet, social post, or blog article, turn to the SBI Magazine. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com to subscribe.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is Greg Alexander, CEO of SBI, a sales and marketing consulting company dedicated to helping you make your number. This is the weekly SBI podcast series. And today I'm joined by Amy Slater of Rovi Corporation, who is the Senior Vice President of Worldwide Sales Ops, so to speak. And we are talking about the annual planning process. And right before the break, Amy was contrasting how they do things there with kind of this generic model that I submitted to the audience today that we see. And there's some interesting things that they do differently. Most notably, they start with the market and they work backwards from the needs of the marketplace and anticipate opportunities and threats. And then they lead to long-range planning, which happens in the middle of the year, and then they cascade down to traditional strategic planning, which is great. That's a model for all of us to follow. Let's pick up the conversation where we left off, which is when sales leadership needs to translate corporate objectives into sales goals for the year. So, Amy, how do you set quotas for the sales team?
So, in terms of we look at our quotas, look at the total revenue objectives, certainly by product and by region, and then we back it out from there. So we take a look at certainly the revenue that you were just talking about that we know is predictable, and we look at a growth factor, and then we add that on. We have teams that do some more of the, like you said, the transactional type business, and then others that do more of that account management. We also take a look at how many renewals we have in our pipeline, in our funnel, and we make sure that we begin those renewal conversations well in advance. And so we take the renewals into account when we're setting those quotas. So there's that anticipated revenue that we know, that we are fairly confident is going to come in.
Okay. So there's a historical revenue analysis that says, Mary Sue, sales rep in Chicago, did $1 million last year. We want her to grow her territory by 20% this year, so her number is $1.2 million. I know I'm oversimplifying, but is that something?
Yeah, I'd say we get pretty granular. We set growth objectives for every single customer.
Oh wow!
And then we do the roll up. So it's not because our business is fairly unique, and I'd say we have a fairly finite set of prospects. It's not sort of this, not like a Cisco that pretty much every company could buy something, or Salesforce.com where you have an entire market. We have a very specific market segment, so we get down to, certainly on our probably top 100 customers, we assign some type of a target to each customer, and then we do a roll up by individual.
That's fantastic. I was going to ask you about that because, that's the perfect way to do it. Now, if you're in a business where you have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of customers, that can be tough to do. If you're in a business like your business where there's a finite number of people who can buy your stuff, it's easier to do. And I'm glad to hear that you guys take forward the effort to make that happen. So that tells me that different salespeople have different quotas, and the quotas reflect the opportunity in their account base. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, very good. And then from there, the calculation of headcount. How do you determine how many reps and managers and directors, et cetera, are required? So how do you handle the math on that?
Typically, we look. There's a big focus right now. It going from the inside out, somewhat how you just described. Inside out meaning inside being the customer. So we look at our customers and see what type of account relationships they require. So it's not surely a calculation based on revenue per head. In some businesses, it's much easier to do that. Again, in a company that has more transactional business and you have an infinite number of prospects. So we first take a look at what is required to have the right customer experience, and then we will determine the headcount to support that. We do also try to look at ratios. Some of the ratios we look at, and we've done quite a bit of homework on it recently, is how many engineers do you need to support the client directors in this? We've recently launched a client director model. And so really how many of the engineering resources do you need to map to the number of sales resources so that we're not too heavy on the sales side? And because such a big part of our business is around the engineering expertise.
Mm-hmm. So you guys are doing so many things that are right out of the best practice playbook, which is great. So you're starting with the desired customer experience. What does the customer want? And then you're doing headcount planning and basically account level organizational design. So it's not just how many people, what types of people, which is really great. I wish everybody did it that way. How do you figure out the desired customer experience? Is that unique per the customer? And do you just ask them and they tell you? Is it generic across market segment? How do you figure that out?
Well, some of it, because we have specific industries that we target, service provider, consumer electronics, there certainly is a profile of customer, but we are in the process also of launching a new customer satisfaction program and customer stat survey, because I think we felt we needed to be more in tune with our customer. So some of this is certainly nirvana and isn't always practiced, but it's the goal that we have in mind for us. So it's really looking at what is the market segment that the customer is in, and then we try to get pretty specific to the exact customer based on feedback, based on the solutions that they've deployed from Rovi.
Okay. And you mentioned you've recently deployed the client director model. In your terminology, what is client director? What does that mean?
Sure. Yeah, so the client director is a person really from an enterprise best practice that we believe owns the entire account relationship, the total life cycle from prospect to delivery of the solution, and that they own that end-to-end relationship. Something different from what we had done before, which was more opportunistic, that we let the opportunities drive the engagement. So you might have 5 different people calling on one client, selling different solutions without really a coordinated effort and account owner. Mm-hmm. So we moved to the client director model. So the client director owns that end-to-end relationship. And then we have supporting product specialists that support that client director. And we feel that that's a better way to improve customer engagement and customer intimacy.
I think it's a great model, especially given your business where there's, a finite number of customers you can sell your solutions to, right? So it makes sense to overinvest in a senior person like client director who spends his or her time understanding the customer's needs and then does a resource mapping back into your company to figure out how to best support them. I mean, that's great. A lot of organizations have a version of that, maybe not exclusively, but they'll have something like a key account or a global account program that mimics that in some way. And the resistance in going to that model is it's expensive because these are very high-skilled people, and there's a fear there that we're going to over-resource this account with things like product specialists and pre-sale support and all that kind of stuff. So when you guys made this move, which sounds like it was in recent history here, did you have to overcome that objection that the cost of sale was going to go up, and what was the business case?
We're in the process of doing just that. So we launched this new model mid-January, and we're still fine-tuning what the resource allocation looks like because we changed the model, and we're still in the process of morphing what the resource modeling looks like, especially when you have a global company like Rovi. How do you gain resources in places like Asia-Pac that have typically been, the resources have been housed out of North America. So how do you do that and how do you scale? So we're in that process right now. We're right in the thick of it, trying to determine where you put these resources and really building the business case all centered around customer engagement.
And then obviously this is probably the reason why you're going to this new customer satisfaction process that you mentioned earlier, because the insight that you gained from that is probably an input into some of these resource allocation decisions. Is that how you plan on using that? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And then when you go to a model like this and you have all of these sales support people, which are usually non-quota carrying people, and everybody gets hung up on the ratio between quota carrying and non-quota carrying people, which to me doesn't make much sense. but it now puts the compensation plan on the table. So have you had to change your comp plan when you made this move?
We had to enhance it. So certainly when you have folks like product sales specialists, it's not net new revenue, it's overlay revenue. So you just have another organization, the sales specialist organization, that's helping to mine the fields. And so you are having to look at compensation. How do you compensate other people for actually supporting the same revenue?
Yeah. So the learning for the audience there is that if you're going to make this organizational change, whether it's to something like a client director model or some other organizational change, keep in mind that oftentimes you have to change the compensation plan to reinforce that stuff. All right, we're going to take another quick short break. When we come back, Amy and I are going to talk about launching the sales strategy in the first quarter. Up to this point, we've been talking about the inputs and the decision-making process to determine what we're going to do. And then normally at sales kickoff, we roll it out, and that represents a whole different set of challenges. If you're enjoying our podcast, you're going to love SBI TV, which is our monthly television program. If you haven't checked it out yet, it's really good. We're getting some great feedback from it. So here's some information on SBI TV. You are watching SBI TV. This is a monthly web TV show featuring guests just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. Each month, you can peek behind the scenes and watch your peers discuss their strategies for how they make their numbers. You are not going to want to miss this. Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is Greg Alexander, CEO and founder of Sales Benchmark Index. This is SBI's weekly podcast series. I'm joined today by Amy Slater, SVP of Worldwide Sales Ops at Rovi Corporation. And today we're talking about the annual strategic planning process from the Sales Ops desk. And up to this point, we've talked about kind of the planning exercises that happen in the third quarter and the fourth quarter, or even in Amy's case, well before that in the long-range planning cycle. Now we're going to turn our attention to Q1, which is when the sales strategy gets launched. So, Amy, a lot of companies have this thing called sales kickoff, otherwise known as SKO. And it's kind of this big moment where you bring everybody together one time a year and you kind of launch all the new initiatives for the year. Does your company do that?
Yes. In fact, we relaunched and recategorized our sales kickoff this year, extending it from about a day or a day and a half. We increased it to about a 3-day event, but yes, we do that.
Now, going from a day and a half to 3 days, given that number of people, that extends or enhances and grows the budget quite a bit. What was the compelling reason to extend it?
One of the big reasons is what we were just talking about before the break, which is all around this client director model. We were launching the new model at sales kickoff. So we knew that we also had to include conversations around the new model, and we did some additional product training because there was a lot of cross training that had to be done across the sales organization.
And who attends the sales kickoff event? Is it everybody in the company? Is it a select group? Who attends?
It's a select group. Certainly the core being the sales people, and then the various supporting entities, several folks out of our marketing organization, and certainly legal as well, the different operational functions that are all working to support the salespeople.
And does the executive team, does your CEO make an appearance?
Yes, actually does. He does a keynote launching of the event as well as he did a closing keynote.
Yep. So I've been to many sales kickoff events. I speak at my clients' kickoff events all the time, and I think it's a great exercise. Sometimes my clients cancel them for budget reasons, and they say, hey, we can't make a business case. What's the objective of sales kickoff, and how do I measure its return? Which is a really tough thing to measure. So have you cracked that code? Can you prove an ROI on sales kickoff?
I have to say we've tried to do the same thing, and I think from my perspective, you can't put a price or an ROI on culture. Yeah. And especially when you're making changes like we did, really significant changes to how the sales organization functions across the company. You've got to do it for cultural reasons, if for no other reason, making people feel a part of something. And people are afraid of change. And anytime you can help calm anybody's fears about change, then you take that opportunity. So I think one of the biggest benefits of any sales kickoff is really getting that camaraderie. And one thing that we did differently this year when we did the sales kickoff is that we renamed it and called it the Worldwide Sales Kickoff, because there's a sense sometimes to become so U.S.-centric that the folks that are in the outer geographies don't feel like they're a part of a global company. So we really made a concerted effort this year. And we also launched the theme for the company this year, which was One Rovi. And that theme has permeated the entire organization. It's in all of our communication to the entire company.
Yeah. I often tell people, just because it can't be measured doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. And people criticize me because our company is called Sales Benchmark Index, and we're like the ultimate measurement guys. But you're right, culture matters, and terminology reinforces culture. So making that shift to worldwide or coming up with the theme, One Rovi, these are all cultural touch points, cultural reinforcement messages that are so critical for the sales force to be successful. All right, let's pick up on our journey here a little bit. So kickoff happened. Q1 is come and gone, and now it's time to refresh our strategies as the year moves on. It's not necessarily time to redo them all, but in every strategy we have a set of assumptions, and then things happen, and those assumptions either hold up or break down, and we want to make little tweaks. And normally what we see there is some form of this cadence, and let me get this out and to get your reaction to it or your explanation as to what your cadence is. So normally we see a weekly strategic alignment call between the CEO, the head of product development, marketing, and sales. And here they review this thing called a hierarchy of objectives. So, we got the revenue goal, the profit goal, and that gets translated to product-specific numbers, which might get translated to market share gain, or even little things like leads generated, et cetera. And then the goals of this communication, or the goal of this weekly alignment call, is to make the CEO's strategy go all the way from him through the organization to the end customer with as little message distortion as possible, which is hard. But the companies that do this tend to outperform those that don't. So the weekly cadence inside of your company, as it relates to reinforcing the culture and keeping everybody on message and making sure there's as little message distortion as possible. What happens?
Yeah, so I'd say that there's that weekly cadence takes place with our ELT, and then it gets translated. We do monthly operations reviews that include not only sales leadership but the general managers of the product team. So that's where we make sure that we're staying in sync. So at the very highest level, they may have that weekly connection, but then as groups, we do our interlock on a monthly basis during our operation reviews.
Okay, very cool. So the ELT, Executive Leadership Team, has a weekly meeting. That translates to monthly operating reviews, which includes a lot of people, including general managers of product lines, et cetera. And that's how and I love that term, interlocking, that's how you keep everybody interlocked. During these monthly operating reviews, what type of data are you looking at? Is it forward-looking, backward-looking? Is it KPI-driven? Is it more qualitative? Like, what's the content of those meetings?
Yeah, so it's certainly there's a financial review portion that takes up just probably only about 30 minutes of that. And then the rest is really talking about, we look at individual customers, we look at product roadmap, and what are any of the hurdles that we're facing. And sales will talk about any type of challenges or roadblocks that need to be removed in order to move forward with our various customers. We talk about market trends, we talk about the competitors, and we do it on a product-by-product basis.
Wow. That's a lot of outward-in mentality, outward-in meaning the market, which is great. Sometimes you get in these meetings and we audit them for our clients at times to try to help them do them better. It's all this internal stuff. The things that you just mentioned there, there's a quick financial review, which leads to individual customer feedback, market trends, competitive analysis. That's all, market-facing activity, which is great. I wish more companies would follow that. All right, if we continue on our journey here, kind of the last part of this process, if you will, is trying to close the loop on our annual strategic planning process, is the quarterly business review, otherwise known as a QBR. And here the CEO usually has one with his direct reports, and the functional leaders do it with their teams as well. And these sessions accomplish one very important thing, which is reallocating resources, specifically people, money, and time, away from failed initiatives and towards promising projects. It's kind of, the MOR, the monthly operating review on steroids, if you will. Given your communication cadence, which is rather thorough and very agile, do you guys bother with QBRs? And if so, how are they different than the monthly operating reviews?
Yeah, so I actually just returned from a business trip last night where we did our sales leader QBR. So our chief revenue officer held a 2.5-day meeting with regional sales leaders, and that's where we actually had a lot of the conversation around the long-range planning, around required resources, to get to the number. It's a look back, of course, at the quarter, and then it's a look forward of what are we going to do between now and the end of the year to accelerate and blow up the number.
Okay, awesome. So for the audience, just to quickly recap here, what you've heard from Amy, which is best in class, is there's weekly communication that reinforces the strategy, which leads to monthly and then quarterly, which naturally flows into their long-range planning process, which flows into their annual process, and then that's kind of a circle, and then it repeats itself. That's an example of how to do it. And if you're struggling with communication, and you would know that if there's big knowledge gaps from one level to the next in an organization. You run into a team and, their understanding of the company is 6 to 12 months old. If you run into that, then you know that you've got a communication problem and refer back to this podcast and Amy's example as to how to possibly fix that. All right, we're going to take one more break. When we return, Amy and I are going to summarize this into 2 to 3 things you can do immediately following this show to set yourself up for success in 2016. If you found this podcast informative but prefer your content in shorter form, you should subscribe to our blog. Each day we publish a best practice that can be read in under 5 minutes on your mobile device. So here's some information on the blog.
Each day you receive hundreds of emails, tons of text messages, countless telephone calls, and sit in too many meetings. How do you find ideas to make the number with all this noise? The SBI blog filters all this nonsense for you and presents only first-rate ideas to make the number. Simplify your life. Subscribe to one blog and read the best content. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com and subscribe today.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is Greg Alexander, CEO of SBI. This is our weekly podcast show. Today, I'm joined by Amy Slater of Rovi Corporation, and we're discussing the annual planning process and then some, all around how to set yourself up for success in 2016. And Amy was walking us through several best practice examples that they're using at their company that I think we can all mimic. So, Amy, I'm going to put you on the spot here and have you speak directly to the audience. If you were to tell them 2 to 3 things to do after listening to this show, specifically to nail the strategic planning process heading into 2016, what are the first 2 to 3 things that come to mind?
I would say, first and foremost, it's having robust communication across sales and product teams. It can be a very lengthy process, and it creates quite a bit of fatigue across an organization. So being organized and orchestrated in the communication is fundamental, I would say, as a first step. And I'd say the second word I would say is transparency. It's an opportunity to take the strategy, translate it into dollars, but to make sure that communication between sales and product, that you not only are setting realistic targets, but then, of course, stretch targets, because there's always that, I want to say, healthy tension between the product teams and sales saying, being protective and saying, holding back a little bit, and product pushing the envelope. And it's how do you bridge that gap between the excitement around the product and the cost part of sales. So it's really how do you bridge that gap and come to an agreement on how you're going to grow the business, and that maps to the strategy.
Very interesting. Specifically, you calling out not only robust communication and transparency, but specifically between two groups, the sales team and the product team, which I think is great advice. Let me offer my 2 cents and 2 resources I want to point the audience to. The first is we just published our annual research report titled How to Make Your Number in 2016. This is the 9th year that we've done it. And in it is our attempt to recommend a set of best practices around the annual planning process. And there's all kinds of best practices in there. So I would encourage the audience to download a copy of that, and that might be a good reference material to use as you go through your planning process. Here's how you can get it. salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016-report. And the 2016 is 2016. It's actually the numerical representation of that. So that's how to get the report. The second part would be I would schedule a workshop with one of our subject matter experts who can help you stand up a process like the one we discussed today inside your company. And if you want some help here, the way to schedule your workshop with one of our sales strategists is the same website, salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016-workshop. 2016-workshop. You'll be glad that you did. Amy, on behalf of our listeners, thank you for unselfishly giving us your time and sharing your wisdom. You have made all of us smarter today, including myself, so we owe you one. So thanks a bunch.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. I've enjoyed it. Thanks, Greg.
And to our listeners, I want to thank you for tuning in, and I want to wish you the best of luck as you try to make your number. Take care.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.